Welcome to Penn State Dickinson Law's Profiles in Leadership series. My name is Daryl Lim. I'm the H. Laddie Muntak Junior Chair and Associate Dean for Research and Innovation at the Law School. This series offers an opportunity to glean insights from top leaders in their respective fields. In each episode, we invite these leaders to reflect on their journeys and share skills, core values, and qualities that make them the leaders they are today. We're very pleased to have Jennifer Wu, founding partner of Groombridge, Baughman Stone LLP. She is a patent trial and appellate lawyer, recognized for her great advocacy skills at trials and outstanding work in cutting-edge biologics cases. She was named to Lawdragon's 500 Leading Litigators in America list and was recognized by Chambers USA. Jennifer received the 2023 Pro Bono Service Award from the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association, the 2022 Diversity Initiative Award from the New York Law Journal, and she is the president-elect of the Federal Circuit Bar Association, a member of the NYU School of Law Board of Trustees, an executive board member of USA for the United Nations Population Fund, supporting work of the UN Population Fund. She clerked for the Honorable Alan D. Lurie of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So let's start with a panel that you spoke on a little while ago at JP Morgan. The panel was called Community Leaders, Stories of Hope and Resilience. What was that event about? And tell us some of your takeaways from what you discussed at the event.
I think it was honored to be invited to it. It was a AAPI Heritage Month event for all of JP Morgan's Asian employees, which they had at least 2,000 people tuning in live. They also recorded it, and they were from countries around the world. Like there were actually 12, I think, or so watch parties in different JP Morgan offices around the world. And in addition to that, they had our panel, or the program was being beamed on every screen, including in the lobby of like the New York City building, as we were speaking. And the panel was interesting, but we were really the opening act for Jamie Dimon, who was going to then do a fireside chat. And for those of you who haven't, kind of been to JP Morgan and seen Jamie Dimon, he's like a cult-like figure. Like people follow him, and it's almost as if a napkin that he drops, I swear people would pick it up and they would keep it. Like people were almost crying after they saw him. And it's been a very long time since I have experienced that kind of mesmerizing personality. I think that, going to court every day, while exciting, the Federal Circuit doesn't generate that kind of idolization. So that was fascinating. But that tells you a little bit what the panel was.
Thanks. So you're a patent attorney, but you are perhaps at least as well known for your work outside of patent law. And this event, I think, describes the kind of work that you do very well. You're a community leader. And at a recent interview actually you gave last year when you received the award, you talked about stories of hope and resilience. You talked about Michelle Go. And one of the things you said during the interview is we should focus not on how they died, but how they lived. So for the benefit of folks on the call or this interview that may not be as familiar with Michelle Go, tell us how you got involved in the story of Michelle Go and what some of your takeaways are.
Yeah, so Michelle Go, for those who don't know, was the young Deloitte woman. I say young, but she was really my age at the time, who was pushed into the Times Square subway during the height of the pandemic. And her sort of, kind of senseless death and violent death really galvanized the country into sort of thinking about what we're about and how to keep people safe. I actually got involved in the Michelle Go case because of another judge named Magistrate Judge Marylin Go. And to understand why I got involved in that, I think you have to go all the way back to law school, which was, I wanted to be a corporate lawyer when I was in law school. But some of the people who were around me thought I'd make a good litigator, including Nick Groombridge, who is one of my partners now. And I ended up competing in a moot court competition for the Asian Bar Association when I was in law school after my 2L summer. It was pretty unusual for people to take up moot court after your 2L summer because that meant you were 3L, and most people were at that point kind of senioritis checked out. But the only reason I decided to do that was because that year, the Asian Bar Conference, the national one, NAPABA, was being held in Hawaii. And I was told by NYU Law that if we won the regionals, the school would pay for me to go to Hawaii. And that seemed like an offer I couldn't refuse. So my partner and I, who had never done moot court, ended up competing in this competition. And I remember that it was a very cloudy day in Newark, New Jersey, because we competed in New Jersey. And the judges who judged the final round included Judge Marylin Go, who was a Eastern District of New York magistrate judge and has since retired. And she really made a big impression on me because she was so quiet at some level and so demure and so gentle, but so fierce and so strong at another level. Like her questions were incisive and got right to the point, but she didn't speak with a loud voice. And the other two judges of the panel were men. And she just really stuck out to me as somebody who I really admired. And as it turned out, we won that competition. I did get to go to Hawaii, but really the thing I won was really getting to know Judge Go. Being able to spend time with Judge Go in Hawaii, being able to see her in subsequent kind of context. I've never actually practiced before her because as a patent litigator, we don't go to the Eastern District of New York very much. But I did go visit her a few times in chambers just to talk to her. She was one of the founders of the Asian American Bar Association of New York. And the one thing that I would say about her that really impressed me was her humanity. No matter who came before her, no matter which student, was talking to her, she was always so thoughtful. And so it doesn't surprise me that so many years later, 20 years later, maybe a little more than 20 years since I met her, she has maintained that. So in the aftermath of the Michelle Go case, she was contacted by Michelle's father, who is actually a lawyer. And they have the same last name, but they are not related. And when she got the call, she knew that I was doing work around anti-Asian hate, and she contacted me, and we agreed to take on the family pro bono and represent them. And going back a little bit to the JP Morgan panel, some of the things I talked about there were why it's important to participate in community, what it means, and also how to do that. And I think fundamentally, kind of what it means to me is that being part of the community is the most meaningful work I've done. The legal cases for my client are, things that I've worked really hard to become good at, and I'm very prepared and I care deeply about it. But working with the community was sort of a happy accident that I think came out of a little bit of luck, but also just motivation to want to bring people together at a time that we were very isolated. And so I think like many people, when Michelle Go died in the subway, we were sitting at home fully masked when we went out and really only isolating with the people we knew, at least for those of us who were in the New York City area. And it felt like I had to go out and do something to help people when people were dying in the streets who look like me, who look like my parents, who look like my sister, who look like my cousins, who maybe even look like my kids, no matter how young they were. And so it was a no-brainer to take on the Michelle Go case and their family pro bono. But in doing so, I think that, our relationship with them is such that we very much want to seek the justice that they want. So for example, if they don't want to speak about Michelle and how she died, which is 100% true, they want to speak about how she lived, we would help them do that. And if they want to not talk to the media, we will enable them to not talk to the media. And for me, at least, working with them in sort of this very private client, relationship context allows us to have this space where we can say things to each other and be friends in a way that perhaps you can't be if you were simply somebody in the community trying to help them, because that's very much more public. There is an attorney-client relationship between us and them where their communications are confidential, and unless they let me know that I can reveal it, I will not reveal it. So that aspect of it, I actually think creates more trust. And it's also probably what the family needs. They need a lawyer who will keep their confidence and not go to the media and use their case for their own benefit. And I don't know that people would necessarily do that, but I do think that there's always a fear when you're involved in a high profile situation that the people who come to you and want to help you are perhaps trying to help themselves at some level and not trying to help you. And I can say for sure that as a patent litigator, I don't get more cases because I have anti-Asian hate cases. It's not, I don't think that those two kind of translate. It's not as if I go before criminal court and therefore I will get, a criminal client who is a paying client. The clients that I serve are very different than the Michelle Goes of the world, but it's something that we do for all of us, which is pro bono work, to try to make the world a better place, not just for ourselves, but for everyone in the community.
It's interesting that you talk about how you almost had to not be the type of lawyer substantively that they are looking for so that you could be the lawyer that they needed.
Yes, and that
Because
is
you don't
a
have a
great,
vested interest in it.
exactly. I think that's a great observation. And I think it's because when you help someone, if it seems like you were trying to use them for anything, it'll come off as being utilitarian or selfish. And I think that's always the case, right? Like now that I've become, when I was younger, I might approach someone and ask for help, and they might, think that I'm being utilitarian. Like I remember going to my first Asian bar conference in Hawaii, and I didn't have a business card, but I remember observing as a law student that a lot of the younger people just handed out business cards. Like they would go to everyone and hand a business card. And if you know me now, you'll know that I don't hand out my business card very much. Like I find it's not distasteful, but it's not something that I do because it symbolizes that I want to get business from you. And the reality of my work is that when I behave in a way that is sort of like all I want is to get business for myself, that's probably not the lawyer you're going to hire. And I think that the one thing that is sort of genuine about the pro bono work is nobody wants more cases of people who have died. If I could have my way, I would never have a client who has died and whose family is looking for me to go collect their belongings at one police plaza. Like those things are not fun to do, and it's not something, and it causes you kind of stress and grief and anxiety, the family as well as the lawyer. But it's almost as if you don't want it as much, then things will come. And so I've sort of, when I observed all these lawyers who were like networking at my first Asian bar conference, I would observe Judge Go, and she would not be networking with anybody. She would just be wandering the conference, and people would come to her and have a conversation. And for each person, instead of wanting something from them, she would try to give them advice that she could help them. And that is actually how I've tried to live my life, at least professionally, which is when people come to me, how can I help you? And when sometimes they try to return the favor, I'll say, no, it's not necessary. Just pay it forward, right? If I have helped you, like the Michelle Go family has, offered, can I buy you dinner, or I need to take you out. There's been other families who have brought me the very Asian chocolate of Ferrero Rocher, and bought me boxes and boxes of Ferrero Rocher, right? Because they're Asian and they think this is what I need, or offered me Kumon classes, prep classes for my kids, things like that. And I always say, no, I don't want you to give me anything. I want you to pay it forward. And I think that approach is actually a better way to develop real connection and to get to know people. Because once people think that you want to know them and name drop you or kind of name drop them or something else, that's a very fraught relationship where they won't trust you. And where real trust comes from, I think, is the idea that I will never name drop the Michelle Go family. I think that, we, for example, didn't even reveal publicly that we're representing them for at least, quite some time, almost a year at the family's request. And we would always consult with them before we would kind of name them. And that kind of trust of I'm doing it only because of for you and not for the public or not for my own reputation is really what animates, I think, the ability to develop long-term relationships, because they know that you'll be there even if you're not good enough. And I was actually listening, the kids were listening to a song this weekend. I have 3 kids, and they're listening to Lana Del Rey's like Young and Beautiful, which is a very serious song for young children under 10 years old, but it happened to come on the radio. And they asked, what does it mean when she sings something like, will you still love me when I'm no longer young and beautiful, right? This is like a very heavy topic for young kids. And I said, sometimes you lose some of the things that make you attractive to someone in the beginning. And the song is about whether you'll be there in the long run. And I think that that's true, not so much from a physical perspective, but it's true from a legal perspective, is people just want to know, will you be there for me when I'm no longer the general counsel? Will you be there for me when I am no longer in charge of a place that will give you work? Will you be there for me when I have no ability to give you work and I am no longer a judge? And the answer, of course, is yes, right? Human relationships are not defined by the things that we get. They're defined by the things that we give. And I think the pro bono work is a good example of that. But we go into all of this as a volunteer, and we're here to help. So that gives you a sense of how I kind of view it. But I do think that for many, many of our younger colleagues who are trying to, at the beginning of their career, to network and to get to kind of these places, the approach of just saying like, I'm going to approach the most powerful person in the room is not, and handing out your business card. I don't think that that's one way of doing it, but it's not the way and not the path that I took. If anything, I would go in a room and not approach the most powerful person, because all the summer associates would be glomming on to kind of the rainmaking partner. And I would just hang out with, at the time, a partner who didn't have all that much work of their own, who happened to be Nick Groombridge.
Good choice. Well, we got real deep, real fast. So I'm very much looking forward to the rest of this. Would you describe Michelle Go as your radioactive spider moment? And by that, I mean, you were just going about doing your thing, and all of a sudden, Michelle Go happened, you stepped up to the plate. And now you're known nationally for the work that you're doing as a community leader, as the panel title describes. Would you say that's a fair characterization?
I think that when I think about the Michelle Go case, I kind of think that it doesn't sound strange, but I almost think that it could have been me who died and that she were the one helping me. I kind of believe in fate, like that there are things that tie you together. She and I turned out to be quite alike. So she went to college at 16. I went to college at 16. She would race down the ski slopes. I was not such a good skier, but I would race down everything else. When I meet with their parents, it's very clear that like our lives were similar in New York City. She was very active. She was a volunteer. She didn't only volunteer with Asian communities. She volunteered with all communities. Like she was a, esteemed member of the junior league, and she was a very kind and funny person. She was prone to doing things that I would do, which is, go on a last minute trip to Europe and probably buy an expensive bag on the way back just because, right? And so when I think about her, I don't think about kind of the notoriety it has brought me or even the speaking engagements. Whenever I think of her, I just think of her as like the alternate universe where she was me. And not for nothing, I was a management consultant like her for 2 years. And if I had stayed in that path, it might have been me, in that subway station on a Saturday morning. And, kind of that, it really just, the more I learned about her and the more I heard about her from her family and friends, the more I realized that she was very similar to me. And I kind of just think that sometimes fate pulls you in certain directions to certain people that are inexplicable. And you just roll with it. And that's kind of how I see Michelle Go, which is, at the time at which I started working with their family, I think had I not been so similar to Michelle, I'm not sure that I would have been able to do the kind of work I did, right? We helped, for example, the family write the New York Times op-ed that they published after her death. And when I described her in some ways, even though I'd never known her, the one line I think that stuck out to me is that she was a wondrous child. And that's kind of, how I perceive her, but it is how my parents perceive me, which is they felt like I came out of nowhere and was just really good at doing a lot of things that, my mom would be like, can you believe Jen can drive 6 hours, to Boston? Like, I can't even drive, right? Like wondrous. And when I hear Michelle Go's parents talk about her, she's wondrous in that it inspires wonder when you see, your children do things that you can't even do. Like my parents, when they see me speak, they're not public speakers by any stretch of the imagination. They think it's wondrous that I speak, that I'm on TV, that I'm in a courtroom. Like they have no idea where this came from because they are scientists who never really gave speeches. And that's kind of how Michelle Go's parents felt about Michelle, was she was wondrous. And I think at some level, every child who moves not from New York City and moves to New York City and is living there on their own in this crazy city is wondrous to their parents. And I feel wonder when I think about my own kids. And so I can only imagine the pain and suffering it feels to have that wonder just like extinguished all in one, very, very, kind of sudden and agonizing and violent moment.
Thanks. So you had dinner recently with Michelle Go's parents, and also at the dinner was Helen Zia. And she wrote a note to you in a book that she gave to you, saying, with gratitude for your good works on behalf of our communities. Tell us a little bit about that dinner and what those words mean to you.
Yeah, so Helen Zia is, the preeminent civil rights leader in Asian American communities. She represented a Detroit auto worker who was killed in the 1980s because of anti-Japanese sentiment, when there was a belief that Asians were taking away jobs from good Americans in Detroit. The Vincent Chin, the gentleman who died was named Vincent Chin. He was beaten. Helen Zia basically navigated that incident and basically fought for civil rights. I came of age during that time because I was not born in the 80s, but I grew up in the 80s. And when I went to college, I remember had a lot of admiration for Helen Zia, and in particular because she's a writer of writing Asian American histories. No one had recorded the kind of struggles of the Asian American community, particularly in the 1980s, even though we talked about it amongst ourselves. So I had actually never met her in person, although we've communicated. And the dinner came about, like many things, because I wanted it to come about. So I had a friend, a good friend from college, saw her in New York at a speech that she gave at a bank. And he went up to her and said, "Oh, I have a friend who also does civil rights. Do you know her?" She said, "Yes, of course." We started corresponding. And kind of very, very fortuitously, the Michelle Go's family was available to have dinner with me when I was in California for other work, for doing work for a client for a deposition. And we ended up having dinner, and she was very kind to drive from Oakland to meet us. The dinner was full of life and full of joy. I think that when you think about people who do this kind of work, it seems very sorrowful because it is about people who've died, if people have been hurt. But we laughed a lot, and we talked a lot about Michelle and how she lived. We did not talk about how she died. We talked about how she lived, what she would have been doing now, and what she was like as a child, as a young woman, as an adult, what she was like, till the moment she died. And it was very life affirming just to talk about those things. We also talked about what it means to advocate for civil rights and the very many different Asian organizations who exist. We're all trying to help, but maybe not all pushing in the same direction. Not because they don't want to, but because there's a lot of organizations who have funding who are kind of trying to get attention out there. But for Helen Zia to kind of write me a note, and I was surprised by it, that she gave me a surprise gift. I'm very, I actually didn't give her a gift, which just goes to show like how unprepared I was for this. Was really, really meaningful because of how much I admired and respected her. I think that there's not much time in my life for a lot of introspection. So I don't look in the mirror very much and think, oh, I'm a leader, or I am a civil rights, kind of person who is involved in the community. I always think I'm a patent litigator. And so for Helen to write me that note really reaffirmed that at some level, the things I've done have become part of Asian American history. And the thing that I said to her, which I still believe it's true, which is, I think that all of us bear witness to the injustices around the world. And, kind of what defines us sometimes is that when you see an injustice that happens to someone else, do you think that you need to do something, or do you just need to bear witness? And I am totally fine with people bearing witness, but for me, I really kind of live by the words that Martin Luther King Jr. said, which is injustice anywhere, right, means that there is no justice anywhere, right? Injustice, right? The idea is that if you have injustice anywhere in the world, you don't have justice anywhere. And I think that that idea means that if you see something that happens, even if you don't have time, even if you're tired, even if you have other things to do, if you can help, you should help. And I think Helen was of the same mold, which is that's why she, at the last minute rearranged her plans to meet us for dinner, is because she thought, if I can help the Michelle Go family, then I will help. And I very much recognized a kindred spirit in her, in the same gentleness that I saw in Judge Marylin Go, which is they're steely and they're fighters, but they're not people who get in your face and demand that, they're not bullies in any way. And that very much appeals to me.
So have people approached you, or have you given thought to making what you've done, the difference that you make as an individual, multiply through institutions, through mentorship, through innovative ways of thinking about how we can work together to make the sort of difference to families, to individuals, not necessarily of a particular race, even though that would be a good place to start, but really the ethos that you have espoused and you have acted on over the course of the many years that you've been working.
Do I think I can replicate it among many different people? Is that the question?
Or institutionalize it, yes.
Institutionalize it. I'm not sure, right? I think it might depend. So I think that like many things in law, the success you have at these things is really based on your ability to be good with people. And being good with people is, in the law firm, we call it human capital, right? So if you lose say a partner retires, it's very hard to institutionalize and replace that partner because they come with all these relationships and people skills that is not something you can teach in a PowerPoint presentation. You can try, but you're not sure you can get there. And human capital is notoriously not fungible, right? Somebody, I could try to train someone to do what I do, but there's already someone like me doing that. And so they can't have the same type of experience that I have. Like if someone just imitates me, they're not going to have the same success that I have. They need to do something different. And that's actually something that Nick Groombridge taught me, which is you need to do something of your own. You can't just do the same thing that someone else does. If life were so easy just to do what Nick does, then we could all be Nick. It's very hard to institutionalize people who are different. And so what you're trying to encourage is what do you really care about, and how can you have genuine, authentic relationships with people where people don't think that you're trying to get something from them. And so for me, for example, in the beginning of my career, when I would approach people who are much older than me, they were very, I don't know if they're suspicious, but they felt like I was trying to use them, right? Like I would go up to them and be like, hey, I'd like to get advice on my career. I would ask them all these questions. And then I realized that they didn't love it when I asked them all these questions. They felt interrogated, right? I mean, you're doing fine on the podcast, but like for me as a young lawyer, in the context of a cocktail party, 15 questions wasn't really the right way to go about it. And the way in which I think I developed my ability to connect with people was really by being authentic and talking about myself. We recently, this was sort of funny, but we recently got an email from a lawyer called DJ Healy, who is a transgender patent litigator who used to be known as a man, but is now identifies as a woman, and is a woman. And they were talking about kind of what they remembered from when we started together at Wild Gotcha. And there really wasn't very much about me because I didn't interact with DJ very much when I was a young associate. I was in New York and they were in Texas. But what they remembered was that, I think the quote was, and Jennifer Wu has always been very fun. I remember that she told me all about how her parents make turkey for Thanksgiving, which is always something that I've always wanted to try. And it is true that my parents make turkey for Thanksgiving with an Asian style. So they marinate it in soy sauce and they do Chinese wine. But the really special part is that they put sticky rice into the turkey. So the stuffing is what, in Chinese we call nuo mi fan, but it's basically sticky rice with like Chinese sausage, has some mushrooms in it, have dried shrimp if you can eat shrimp, right? Things like that. And, when I think back 20 odd years, I don't remember that telling DJ that story. It is absolutely true that that's how my parents make turkey, but it is not something that I particularly remember. And thinking back to why I'm memorable, the reason I think that people remember me is because I'm authentic and I sort of just tell you what I'm thinking. And, I think within reason, right? Like not like ranting, and just not stopping in a monologue, but try to give you vignettes of what it feels like to be me. Growing up in New Jersey with everyone else having actually bread stuffing and I have sticky rice stuffing, right? Things like that. And when I think back to why people remember that, being memorable turns out to be connected to how you're different and not how you're the same. So to your question of institutionalizing, I think that anything that's institutionalized, I have sort of a negative reaction to because it's probably going to be cookie cutter. I tend to think that you have to develop your own spark. And how I got there was really trial and error. I probably told DJ a lot of other stories about patent law and how I wanted to be a patent lawyer and my parents being scientists. But apparently the only thing that really stuck was how my parents make turkey, right? And that just goes to show that what resonates for people isn't really kind of what the work is, but who you are and painting that picture of what it feels like to be you. And I think over time, I've gotten very good at describing what my life is like. I think I have a what people call a imaginative inner life, where everything that happens to me, I see as like a funny story. It's sort of like there's some, kind of like there's books that you read as children where, every like mishap turns into a funny story. Like Matilda by Roald Dahl is an example. Like her parents are awful people and they eat like TV dinners every day in front of the TV. It's like a terrible experience, but it's funny because the parents are so bad. And so that's kind of how I see my life. It's sort of like if my flights get canceled, I'm like, of course, that's what would happen if flights got canceled, right? Like everything has a little bit of humor to it. And therefore, if you don't complain about it and you describe it in a funny way, as long as you feel good about it, that's what people take from it is sort of the energy of like when you laugh, they laugh. And that's why, comedians have laugh tracks on their late night shows because when other people laugh, you laugh too. So I feel like I laugh at myself quite a bit, and that's probably what draws people to me and why people think I'm memorable. Now, is that replicable? I'm not sure. I think being funny is highly, highly individual. But I know that for me, at least, like I can usually find humor in almost any situation.
So you're at Groombridge, you helped found Groombridge. How is Groombridge different from the other firms out there, and how much does it reflect Jennifer Wu?
Oh, I think it's probably very unique in the same way that I'm unique. We are fully equity women partner, which is not true of any other place I've been. And that I think does make a difference. So for example, we had a partner retreat in DC, and the activity I planned before that retreat was that I took all the partners and men and women, if you wanted, to go to get our nails done at a salon in DC. And we did have one male partner come with us, which was awesome, and get a pedicure. So, that as a woman perspective, I think is different. I have a ping pong table, has been reported on in the media, that is outside my office. And it actually comes from the fact that I always wanted a ping pong table. I played ping pong like, in summer camp, and my parents never got me a ping pong table. So even when I became a partner at Paul Weiss, I never got one because I didn't have space in my New York apartment. But as soon as we got the office and we had picked our offices, which it was somewhat random, but I didn't like select necessarily where I was sitting. As soon as I saw my space, like they were like, what should we put there? And I was like, I need a ping pong table. And so sometimes you hold on to things that are yours. If you look back of me, I don't know if your listeners can see, I have I have bobbleheads of all the Asian judges, which are given out at the Asian Bar Conference. And I think that for me, at least, like the culture comes not necessarily from the decoration or even the ping pong table, but it's the ethos of when you're here, right? Of trying to go and talk to everyone, see how they're doing, are they having fun? I'm not the only one who does that, of course, but I think that the fact that people enjoy being here, the fact that usually when I'm here, I try to take people out for lunch. I talk about the work I'm doing. There's an energy about it that I really like. And I often say that I'm naturally caffeinated. I don't drink coffee. I drink tea, but not that much of it. And I feel like the office has that same level of energy where it shouldn't, and it doesn't feel like a drag. It shouldn't feel like a Monday morning, which today is, that it's exhausting in any way. It should feel energized and that you should be happy to be here. So hopefully we can continue that. But my ultimate goal, would be to create a happy law firm. And I hope that we can kind of, and the legal profession can be very challenging at all law firms, but hopefully we can create a place that people feel that they can be themselves, but also take time away for their families. We've had a baby boom in our law firm, for example. There's at least 3 or 4 people who are out on parental leave right now, and I could not be happier. When I was a young woman growing up, I didn't think that, for better or for worse, family and work was compatible. And anyone who knows me knows that I spend a lot of time with my kids. I do a lot of things with them, and I want that for all of our lawyers and not for them to only have a life in the office.
Do you have folks coming to you and say, wow, I'm just amazed at what you're doing at Groombridge. How do we do this at our firm?
Yeah, people do say that. I think that has to do with maybe sensing that there's dissatisfaction at their own law firms. And I think it's generational issues. So for example, what somebody who's 60, what makes them happy may not make what someone who's 20 happy. And so for me, at least, bridging the generation gap is really, really important because I think each generation wants something different. So for example, I clerked for Judge Laurie of the Federal Circuit, and he turned 89 years old this year, which is amazing. He told me long ago that the birthdays he looks forward to are the ones that are square numbers. So the last square number was 81, and he's looking forward to 100, which is remarkable. And he's been such a great mentor of mine. But I also know that he came from the generation of a Great Recession, right? And I know, for example, and I think this is not a secret, that he eats the same thing for lunch every day. Every day, without fail, he eats the same thing. I can tell
What is
you
that?
that it's a turkey sandwich, roast turkey, no mayo, no sauce, any on it. Half a turkey sandwich on bread, with celery sticks and carrot sticks every day. And when I think about my junior associates, for example, I have one named Ben, and I love Ben. Ben told me that he doesn't eat the same thing day after day ever. And that probably means he's not eating leftovers. Like, I feel like my generation, I eat a fair bit of leftovers, but it might also be because I have kids. So when you have kids, they don't finish everything. And so when you go home on the weekends, there's always going to be a leftover day. There's always one day that's like, guys, we need to eat all the leftovers, right? Even if it's just pizza. But that's an example in a very small way of a generation gap. On the one end of the spectrum, you have someone who's almost 90 who has eaten the same thing probably for the last 50 years for lunch. On the mid spectrum, there's me who changes it up, but fundamentally I'm still eating my leftovers. And then I have a younger generation without kids who can't fathom eating the same thing for lunch every day. And so you can see that among the different generations, what makes people happy and what drives you can be very different. So for example, if you told me, and I'm a creature of habit at some level. So every time I'm in the office in New York City, I usually go to the coffee shop downstairs and grab the same wrap. I actually get the same wrap every time. And to the point where people make fun of me now for that. They'll be like, Jen's going to the coffee shop downstairs and getting the same wrap again. I'm like, yeah, I am really excited.
And what wrap is that?
That is a chicken Caesar wrap from Macchiatos downstairs from our office building. They know me when I walk in. They actually just give me the wrap, just to give you a sense.
Simplify slide, and I suppose you're a bit like a judge in that sense.
I'm a bit like my judge, and the reason I like it is because I know what I'm getting, and I don't have to worry about it. I know I won't get sick. And And that's when I got older, I realized how important that was. When I was younger, I'd be like, yes, I'm going to go eat at the food cart and, I'm going to try like a different food cart every day. But from time to time, the food cart meat was not ideal, right? From time to time, you might get sick. And when you're younger and you don't have as much responsibility, getting sick is, it's just a day that you take off and you have to go home and you have to like take some Pepsid or something. When you get older, you realize people are relying on you. So I know, for example, when I'm in New York, that my kids rely on me. So if I get sick, what are they going to have for dinner? So without fail, probably today, I'll go down and I'll walk in and they'll hand me my sandwich, my wrap. And so your perspective changes because of how old you are and not because of who you are. I 100% think that when the younger generation becomes me and they have all these kids and people relying on them, they too will be like, I want to eat the same thing because I know it's good. I know I won't get sick, and it's just sustenance. I don't need to be the most adventurous eater and searching out the most important, kind of different food carts around the city the way I did when I was a summer associate. But those generation gaps, I think, are profound. And so when people think about like how do you kind of build a law firm like that, I do think that you need people of every generation, and you need to reach out and you need to break bread together. You need to talk, you need to spend time together. And then most importantly, you need to not be judgmental. So when someone who's young says, I don't really want to go in the office, I want to work, in a remote area, I think you should be able to do that. Like we have people working in Buffalo, New York, and in Michigan who are out of our New York office. There are a lot of law firms who maybe would not be comfortable with that, but I'm comfortable with that because I know that there are times that you need to move places to be with family. And from my perspective, the work can get done anywhere. And that's a difference from the older generation who grew up without cell phones, without electronics, without devices, and was used to coming in and like hand filing paper copies of their filings, of faxing things, and always being in the office. So I think there's a middle ground there where you can be remote and over Zoom, just like we are now, can be okay. But generationally, my generation is the dot-com generation. I graduated to, 1999, 2000, where we were like exploding. We got internet and everything like changed. So I can see value in kind of the kind of newer generations thinking, which is, why do I ever need to come in? But also the old generation, which is more like, I don't know how you get anything done if you're not with people. So there's probably a balance there. But when people ask me how to build like, kind of, a better law firm or a place like this, I would say you need people who are kind of my generation in their 30s and 40s and even 50s to really start leading and not just being like kind of not in charge, because there is this kind of bridge aspect to kind of bridging the gap between, kind of the people who are 60 and over and the people who are 30 and younger.
Thanks. Last question, I'll just keep it open so that you can end however you like. What's one thought that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I guess it would be that in your practice of law, if that's what you're doing, or even anything else, I would say make it fun. Choose a venture and do the things that sing to you at the moment that you are asked to do it. Don't pass up experiences that you want. That's not to say that you should accept anything that comes your way, but try to do things that make you uncomfortable until you are comfortable with it, and then move on. Because one of the kind of meaning of life, at least to me, is to push yourselves to experience things that you may not have thought that you could, and being open to everything. I'm coming up on my 25th year college reunion, for example, and I'm giving the midlife talk to the entire class. And you're supposed to reflect on kind of where you've come. And a lot of what people are probably going to say, and I heard that this was said at last year's midlife talk, was how important community is. That as you get older, and I think everyone ends up having medical issues at some point, that when you're sitting in the hospital room, the one thing that lifts your spirits, when even if you can't, be making an oral argument, even if you are not the person who is standing up in court, the one thing that lifts your spirits is your community. And part of building community is really just experiencing it all and reaching out to people who are different, whether older, younger, poorer, richer, different places, and being able to make them feel happy and feel like, we're all in this together, which obviously we are because we're all human.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Profiles in Leadership.
Excellent,
all the
excellent questions, Daryl. And thanks for keeping, I was very late to this, so thank you for getting this all in. I appreciate you.
Thank you.